as CEOs, as leaders, we really like to make objective, clear, solid decisions. And most of our day is spent somewhere between the pure objectivity and the pure heuristics. And at some point, we've got to make a decision to move the thing forward. And a lot of that, I'm able to game out and help people learn what's that second order, third order, even fourth order thinking. If this, then what? What's the ripple effect? What's the outcome? What's the thing that's going to happen? And also help training the people around me. Oh, we're going to do this thing. Okay. Have you thought about this as an outcome?
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I am super excited to introduce you to David Lowe-Rogstad. David, welcome to the Ripple Effect Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you today?
I am doing good. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. I know it took a little bit of time to get this scheduled, and I appreciate your patience in making it happen. But I have been thoroughly digging your Substack, your whole vibe, everything that, just by way of my audience, so that you guys know, one of our prior guests, Sean Tenney, actually introduced me to David. You guys had a prior working relationship. Sean had said, you guys are going to get along. You're going to have so much to talk about. You and I got together on a Zoom, and I think originally we were scheduled for like maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And I think we went like well over an hour. And we've just started creating ripples for one another. And I think it's been such a huge, just a great experience. I was going to say a huge experience, but a great experience just getting to know you and learning what you're all about and the approach that you're taking. And I'm just super excited to have you here. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So one of the things that I think is always helpful for my audience is like, where do we find your feet today? Where's home for you right now? I know you and I were just talking about your tricked out desk and all the cool stuff you got there in your environment, but where is home right now?
Yeah, home is Selwood, which is a neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, left coast, upper left. Been here 24 years, and it's spring in the Northwest, which is a special kind of rejuvenation, redemption, rebirth. It's a special time of year, and super happy to be here.
Love it. Is the area that you live in, what drew you to move there initially?
So I grew up in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area, mostly Oakland, kind of that area, and had been in here in the Northwest a few times for different reasons. And every time I came here, it just felt right. And then, like many stories, we had a child and could not afford to live anywhere in the Bay Area we wanted to live.
Yeah.
So we came up one weekend just to look, and ended up buying a house.
That's how it works. That's how it always works.
It is.
Right?
And we looked at a few houses and they were okay. And then we looked at this house and I said, I can see our child learning to ride his bike because we have this long driveway. I can see him learning to ride his bike. And that was it's a very emotional decision of one of the biggest purchases you'll make in your life. And
yep.
Yeah, so 2 months later, moved out of our apartment in Oakland, and me and the two cats and a moving van driving up I-5 and haven't
and
looked
the rest
back
is
since.
History, right?
And the rest is, and it's part of this neighborhood. I kind of call it Mayberry because it's this very small, intimate neighborhood. It's very walkable, but I'm 15 minutes from downtown. I'm 20 minutes from the airport. I love traveling and going to I love big cities,
mm-hmm.
but I love coming back to my little city even more. It
That's
feels
awesome.
so good. Yeah.
So you've had a very dynamic career, and we're going to talk about a couple of key things today,
Yeah.
But give my audience just a little bit of sense of your background. So you and I met because of Sean. You and Sean worked together, I think, at your agency.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean just spoke so highly of you as one of the most heart-centered leaders he's had the ability to work with, and someone who is a really strategic and high-level thinker. In looking at your past work experience and just what you've done throughout your career, you seem like every single time is like continually improved, and been able to leverage more of and lean into your strengths. But tell us a little bit about kind of that career journey, that career path, and
Sure.
ultimately what it's leading you to today.
No, yeah. Um, so my core background is in graphic design, design industry. I was incredibly fortunate, and I really started my career when the internet was not even really a thing. I worked my first ad agency, first real ad agency I worked at. People, why would I buy a website? Why would I pay for a website?
Yeah.
And I give the owner, who's still a friend and a mentor and a colleague of mine to this day, and this was, I'd say, 30-ish years ago. He wanted to get his agency into the web space. So we would bury the cost of a website into an ad campaign so that we could learn how to do it. And it was the Wild West. There were no
Yeah.
rules. We were making stuff. And I loved that opportunity to be there. So I grew up on that side, on the creative side of the industry. Then got to a point where I said, I'm smart. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to start my own agency. And, learned a ton in a very short period of time. But the most valuable thing I learned was I liked running creative agencies more than I liked doing the creative work itself. And
Okay.
surprisingly was better at it than I was as a creative person. I think I was a better creative leader than a creative individual. Um, and that was great. Loved it. Then got recruited to come to a much larger agency to help them build the agency and scale it and professionalize it. And sometimes like to say that my sweet spot is all in all the non-sexy parts of running a business. I'm gonna, I've yet to meet an entrepreneur who says I'm gonna operationalize my HR and build a cash flow management strategy. And I'll tell you, those are the first two things that are going to limit your scaling. And I enjoy those things. I really, dig in both the operational side, but also on the human side, on the leader side. And that's where, Sean and I hired him and, was just this phenomenal young employee. He went to become a partner in his own business. And it was such a proud moment for me of, wow, I've taken you as far as I can under my mentorship here. And now you're going to do great things. So we've always kind of maintained that relationship. So that's sort of been my main career background, but I've always kind of dipped into the entrepreneurial side, then come back into corporate life, then dipped in. And you know for those who do Enneagram, I'm a strong type 5, which is I've got a very grass is greener and compartmentalizing and reinventing. So that's been sort of my journey, and so now a lot of what I'm doing is kind of giving that back and leading forward and really being in a space where I'm helping other, mentored other agency owners as they've started their agency or they're growing their agency or they're getting to scale issues, and really kind of leaning into that and kind of taking that collective. I think I'm really enjoying the sage journey, if you will.
Well, I know one of the things that you and I talked about previously was, your interest in building the leaders of tomorrow. And it seems like every opportunity that you've been engaged in, you do things like that with. You identify the talent, you cultivate it like you did with Sean, you encourage them, which I think is really, that's not lost on me, because I think a lot of good leaders want to hold on to those people, not launch them from the nest. Right. And the thing that really
Mm-hmm.
impressed me in our first conversation was how you really were like, if they go off and do their own thing, then I've done my job. Like I've really, um, I've contributed something of significant value, not only to them, but to the world in general, because trying to just keep
Mm-hmm.
them in house, yes, we benefit from that, but, the world doesn't necessarily, right? Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
a small subset of our clients, but at the end of the day, there's much bigger opportunity. And to me, I don't exactly remember the way that you phrased it, but the thing that really caught my attention was just how committed you were to being a positive rippler for the people that you get the opportunity to work with, whether they're working for you or that you're engaged with to support them or their agency or their business. Where does that come from? Was that something that you learned coming up through the ranks as a young
Hmm.
executive? Did somebody teach you that? Or because they didn't teach you that, you're like, I'm going to do it different. I'm going to do it, quite different.
Actually, yes is the answer to all
Yes
of
and
those
yes, right?
questions. And part of that is the person I mentioned earlier, this first real agency I worked at, the owner, uh, he was a person who introduced me to abundance thinking and gratitude thinking. He was
Okay.
very much an abundance model thinker, and really had that rising tide lifts all boats, and really kind of gave so much of his time, his attention, and built upon me a mindset that there really is enough for everyone. And we have, the more you give, the more you get. And at the same time, incredible leader, incredible mentor, terrible manager. And, and, and there are many things I learned about managing people by saying, I'm not going to be that.
Yeah.
And he was very, and that was the other thing, is he's very self-aware of it. He's probably about 10 years older than I am, and but just very self-aware of, he's making these intentional choices of, I'll say poor management, but intentional management choices to drive certain things. And that also helped me kind of learn that intentionality of do things for a reason, and kind of build upon that. So that's been really a blessing in that I've been able to carry that through. And in my experience, every time I've given in business or given, like, it's come back.
Yeah.
And it's that reinforcement loop that happens where you think that you get into a scarcity mindset. And I come from a scarcity mindset, but professionally in my energy, I've been able to have a very gratitude oriented approach.
So that's kind of like the ripple effect, right? You cast that stone and you don't know how far or how deep that action that you take, or how that ripple will affect somebody else, but it almost always comes back to you, right? It always returns, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in ways that we can't expect. I would imagine Sean's probably on this list, but I mean, there's probably more than a handful of people that you've been able to do that for, and not only just demonstrate that through the actions that you take on their behalf and the support that you've given them, but is there anybody? Uh, I don't want to give Sean a big head, right? So, is there anybody else that you might be able to use as an example of something like, you just saw something in them and that you knew there was potential, and with the right encouragement and the right amount of investment of time and focus, that they just took off, and now they're off doing things, but they still come back to you and give you the credit for helping them, sort of pre-launch.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I've had a few people in my circle who have, they've either started businesses or they're growing and kind of building upon that. But I can think of one in particular where, she's a woman of color and runs a really amazing like series of businesses. And quite unintentionally, we were just catching up. We were talking, and she even said, she said, "You talk about me when I'm not in the room." She said, "I'll be in, I'll hear about you saying you should really meet Tia because she's amazing and does these things." And it was a thing like, because of where I'd come from, it didn't even occur to me like I was doing something.
Yeah.
But even, for someone, and we had this really amazing conversation because, I was talking about imposter syndrome and deficit schema and all the things. And she kind of paused and she said, "You have imposter syndrome?" I'm like, "Oh, are you kidding? Of course I do." But it was a wonderful opportunity to kind of me pause and say, wait, I'm in the club. Like, I have all the advantages and I still feel this. What does she feel like?
Sure.
And we had a really amazing conversation around that of like, oh, and that really helped me expand and rethink and reframe how I approach conversations, in that, oh, if I'm feeling this, someone who isn't, we'll say, in the club, that's, that's exponential. And
Yeah.
so that's really encouraged me to have the, like, and the other piece of that too is coming, like, I may not be the right fit for this particular engagement or this particular consultation or this sort of thing. But so it's like having those people, like, you're going to be better served talking to this person because that's going to bounce back. And that's what I love, is that opportunity to just build those kind of connections and do that piece.
I think that's why you and I get along so well, and we're going to become fast friends because, great ripplers do it because it's second nature to them. They don't do it because there's a payback or there's, some sort of reward. They do it because they see a opportunity or a need that needs to be filled, and they
Mhm.
know because they keep their eyes and ears open for the people that they want to support, and they just magically find the way to to fix whatever that situation might be by making that connection. And I think what's really amazing in what you said is that takes a lot of self-awareness. I don't think I'm necessarily that intuitive or that great at it. I just try to do the best I can. You are probably light years ahead of me in this regard, but the fact that you had enough self-awareness in what you sort of environments that you saw that maybe didn't sync up, or people that didn't quite support you, past work, colleagues or bosses or whatever, and know that, hey, I want to do it different. I want to conduct myself as a leader out there in the world differently. That's a huge leap. A lot of times people don't make to understand who they are before they go and offer what it is to the world. But then you're taking what you offer to the world and then you're bringing it back down to sort of a myopic level. Whereas, like, okay, like Tia, or did you say Tia? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tia or Sean or anybody, myself included, uh, you're looking already out ahead of the tip of the skis and saying, okay, what can I do to contribute and add value to them? And the only way that you do that is by saying, hey, I'm going to invest in who this person is and get in to know who they are. And that's what I
Hmm.
really respected and admired about our first conversation was you came to that conversation with so many thoughtful questions. Like, I didn't feel like you were going down a list. Like, I felt like that was
Hmm.
just natural as to who you are. But, I thought our conversation was going to go this way. And we went like, we took a left turn at Albuquerque and went like down so many cool roads. And I love that because that's the beautiful aspect of rippling, right? In that you can connect at that level. But my guess is that you leverage that superpower to do that, to really bring these people back to the table for them to see things in themselves that they may not have been looking at before.
And that's something that I've had the experience more in my corporate life, where I've had direct reports or people I've been managing who are more emerging leaders, and there's a lot of programs to help people become better managers, better salespeople, better whatever. But the idea of leadership, especially those emerging leaders, I've experienced, they don't know that they can invest in themselves.
Yeah.
And I remember I had one report who I found a program. I said, "Oh, this is like this 2 week event. You should, or 2 day event. You should go to it, and it'd be really great for you." And she came back. She said, "Well, can do we have the? Can I spend the money on that?" And it wasn't a significant investment. It was a on site, local, and it just had that unlock of like, oh, these people who are moving into a nascent leadership role don't realize both the value and the importance of investing in themselves and building those skills. Because I'm sure you've seen it of plenty of spaces on the corporate side where it's like, hey, Steve, you're a manager, and good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Already got promoted to my level of incompetence, but now I have no resources or help.
Well,
Yeah.
and it also goes into that whole dive of the people who the only growth path is to be managers, and not everyone is a good manager. So it's
Yeah.
creating growth paths for people that are really good at their craft and do your craft.
What was it about? I guess this is kind of a twofold question, but what was it about the agency environment that intrigued you initially as a career path? And then what has kept you in that environment, but now more from a consultative, strategic perspective to do what you're doing now? That industry obviously has gone through a very big transformative, experience. Not only when the internet fully came about and people were having to do websites and now look at marketing differently, but now as you look into all of the different resources and the tools, that industry is once again sort of going through a pretty big flux because people are like, do I
Mm-hmm.
need an agency because now I got AI and all these other aspects? what was it about the agency model that really first attracted you, and then what's kept you there, and where do you see it going for your work and the work of the agencies that you work with as we move into the next 3 to 5 years?
I like that you slipped a third question in
Yeah,
there. It's a two-part question. Here's three.
yeah, it's a two-part with a third bonus. How about that?
With just a small third add.
And I broke every rule of a podcaster. Like, you never ask more than one question, but that's
No,
just not how my brain works. It's like,
well, actually, that's kind of a good pivot, because I think there's a couple things in that. Well, one, it's where I started, so it was sort of second nature. But I really found kind of what kept me in it, because I did have a couple opportunities in my career to move brand side and work with one single brand. And part of where I pulled back was that feels really boring. Like, you're doing one thing all the time and
yeah,
working with one brand. And, something that I love the most, especially as I grew in my career, so I grew into, creative director and then owner. And then, even though I was still internal operations, I'd come in and work on the strategy business side with clients quite a bit. And there'd be days where we'd be, you're selling software in the morning, you're talking about footwear at lunch, and then you're working with a really cool nonprofit in the afternoon that all have very different. And for me, it's digging in and understanding their business needs, understanding their business things. And it's kind of that constant learning. The example I love to use is 18 months ago, I couldn't have told you the first thing about robotic surgery. Now, with a client we have, I could probably sell you a $2.5 million surgical robotics platform, because, just digging in and learning, what are their pain points? What is their business? What are the advantages? Like, all these models that go in. And it's fascinating to me, because design is not just, it's not just making pretty things on a page. It's solving business problems with creative tools. And I love that aspect of it. And so that's the piece that just has always kept me there. And part of it too is it's really fun. Like, it can be really fun. For some reason, I have a lot of colleagues who are in the finance world, the CPA world. And like, I am the least cool person in a design agency, and they all think I'm so cool and creative. It's kind of fun that way. So,
well, I think you get that naturally anyway, because I think you probably are one of the coolest guys I've met. So, I mean, you're probably going to wear that moniker for the rest of your life, regardless of what you do. So, yeah,
I'll take it. But attempt to answer your question. You're right. We are, I'm seeing right now what I saw 20 years ago, which is this really radical change because 20 years ago, I was having conversations. Websites aren't real creative. They're not real advertising. People will never engage with a website the same way they engage with, say, a Super Bowl ad or, this ad campaign. And it changed.
Sure.
And we're starting to see that right now. Where it goes, I don't know. I do know, our model, we sell time and expertise. And time is pretty finite. So the value becomes the expertise stage. And one of the promises with AI is it can scale time. So does that mean the expertise side becomes commoditized?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think so. I think that expertise starts to become, more valuable, more interesting, more unique. And I always come back to, again, 20 years ago when I started my agency. That was a time started with like WordPress and Drupal and other kind of content management systems. And there was sort of this fear, oh no, clients can do their own content. They can make their own website updates. We're out of date.
Yeah.
We can no longer have. And that didn't happen because, clients weren't expert at creating content. They weren't experts at the bigger strategic, things. They started to look like everyone else because all the tools were homogenized and democratized, which I think is a good thing.
Sure.
But it started to be like, okay, what becomes that value of, and I struggle with the word expert. I don't like experts, but expertise of knowledge of how to create something unique and interesting. I think that's where, that value add starts to become. But yeah, it's, we're in a state of flux and we're probably a couple years out from where we're going to land.
I think the way that you approach your work and the direction, even if there is the threat to the industry that AI could potentially replace a lot, you're still never going to replace the creative mind, right? And the components that I think a lot of agency owners that you probably work with or will be working with, once they get that, wrap their head around it, it may be that we have to be more strategic and a little bit more intentional about how and what we offer to the client. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, AI just becomes another set of tools, just very much like a web platform that you're going to create the website, or the marketing tools that you're going to send out. And God forbid if anybody still mails anything anymore, right? But at the end of the day, the these are resources that could help create velocity, but they don't necessarily, velocity for the sake of velocity doesn't do you any good if there's
Right.
no intention and there's no
Yeah.
end game. And AI never will come up with that. They could come up with a list of why we think this is the intention, or here's your list of what AI thinks it should be. But having someone with your experience at the table that says, hey, look, robotic surgery is definitely here to stay. People are going to have questions. People are going to want to talk to resources. They're going to want to know and have information about it before they make a decision as to whether that's something that they either want to buy or they want to take
Mhm.
advantage of to be utilized, for their operation or whatever. There's a human element that will always be there, and that won't be replaced, which I think gives it doesn't mean that people have to completely change their business model. It just means that people have to be adaptable enough to know that they need people like you to say, look, I know it's out there and I know there's concerns, but don't freak out over it like everybody else is. Let's find an avenue and a mechanism to make this lockstep with what needs to happen over the next year, 2, 5, whatever. And I think
Yeah.
you only get that from having someone like you sitting across the table from me that says, okay, what is it that we're trying to do? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And you do, Steve, what you do best, which is your business, and let me worry about the other components, and let me
Yeah.
figure out how to to create the lineup card to make the best possible team that we need in order to give us the results we're looking for. Is that a pretty
Yeah.
good summation there?
And if it is, and if I could add one other thing, is
Sure.
that in a service based business or a knowledge economy based business, like I said, we sell time and expertise, and your strategic advantage, your unique value prop is your people.
Yep.
And if you're not building the best possible people, what does that mean for the future of your business? And that's where I've always tried to come back to that: investing in people, growing the best people, but also creating the environment for them to really thrive and do their best work. And I've been in situations where I've been coaching people who are, oh, my team's not creative, they're not taking enough risks, they're not doing this, and then I'll get in there, dig in, and I'm like, what is their incentivization for risk? What happens when things go wrong? How do you react, and how do you experience? So really kind of digging in and seeing, and not saying it's always one person to hold the responsibility, but it's what is the environment, what is the culture of risk, of failure, of lack of opportunity, and that really starts to unpack. Like then you start to see those people start to perform at a really high level.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying there, because at the end of the day, when you think about it, the approach I would take if I was talking to a CEO or an executive team are like, well, yeah, we just have a bunch of people that aren't taking risks, or they're not out of the box thinkers, or they're not being creative. Okay, let's break each of those down and say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what was the last risk you took as the CEO of the company? What
Right.
was the last creative idea you came up with on your own? And the funny thing is and I'm a CEO of a tech company right now, and I could be guilty of this all day long, which is I can make grand statements because that's the assumptions that I'm operating under, and those assumptions, right or wrong, are the ones that I'm operating from on a daily basis. But then when you start asking those questions, which only come from someone like you, which would be, okay, let's dig below the surface. What does creativity actually mean? What does out
Right.
of the box thinking actually mean? How much risk versus reward are you offering? Like you said, right? When was the last time that you incentivized them to do that? And if it doesn't go right, what was the outcome, or what's the ramification? And what if everything that you think will never work does work? And you get
Right.
them
Right.
into that plane of thinking, because at the end of the day, we oftentimes, especially from an executive leadership perspective, we get stuck in our lane, and our repetitive thinking doesn't allow for us to even think beyond it. But it's kind of funny that we're the judge and jury of what our teams are doing when we're not actually doing anything to help support that level of thinking or that approach to
Right.
being creative on the job, which I think from a practicality perspective is probably green pastures the clients that you serve. Cause it's like, all
Mhm.
right, let's challenge some of these assumptions. Let's look at, your current environment, but I'm not the Bobs from Office Space. I'm not coming in and saying, oh, so tell me what you do here. Right. You know,
Right.
I'm actually like, I really want to know, like, I really want to understand and appreciate it, because that's the only way that we can make improvements. Sure, we can swing for the fences and go for the grand slam, but singles and doubles are really what we need in order to validate, improve. And then once we've got those, then we've got some success and confidence built behind us. Now we can start to take bigger chunks out of what comes next.
I'm a big believer in small ball. Get
Yep.
him in,
Yeah,
get him
me
over.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell my team, aim small, miss small, right? And,
Yeah.
let's try the little things, see what the results are, get some successes, then expand upon those a little bit, and then see where you go from there.
Well, and something I've always tried to do in a when I was in a CEO or leadership position is that part of my job is risk profiling, risk assessment, and so if a team or an individual says we want to try X, I'll evaluate, okay, is the outcome of this is I might get the annoyed phone call from the client saying, hey, can you course correct your team? Or we might get fired by the client. And if it's the previous, like, okay, I'm willing to go there, like that's fine. And I may have done this in the past and it didn't work, but you may do something differently. You may try something. So as long as I'm comfortable with the risk, and that's the other piece I think is so important, is once I own the risk from people who report to me, I own it. So it's like if I say no, then we move forward. But if I say yes and it didn't go, like, and I've seen that, I'm sure you have too, of the oh well, June over there and the team, they made a choice, even though they report to me and I approved it, but I'm going to die. And that creates that safety for those people to say, you know what, DLR's got my back.
Yep.
DLR is good. And I've had those people, I can tell they've had professional trauma where they have been told this and then just left
And then
out there
still
with
get thrown
cheese in
under
the
the bus
wind.
because of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's rebuilding that trust of saying, hey, I'm in the room saying, and I was in a call not too long ago where the team was kind of getting hammered. And I said, hold on, they asked exactly what we asked them to do. It's wrong that, they went a different, but we changed our parameters.
Yeah.
So let's address that. And, the team was very apologetic, like, oh, we're sorry if we misunderstood. I'm like, no, you didn't misunderstood. We told you this date and then we moved the date and didn't tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oops. Yeah.
Whoops. But it was interesting, the dynamic of in the room, because it was sort of like I could tell the frustration on the team that I was working with of like, how did they get this wrong? And I realized, oh wait, they got this wrong, because I look at the slide, I'm like, that's the wrong date.
Yeah.
And then I kind of post processed and said, oh yeah, they did what we asked of them.
Yeah.
And that's on me I did not facilitate that communication. So let's clear that up. And once we got past that, it was great.
And the fact that you own it and you're willing to, kind of take it on the chin and move on beyond it, rather than, just vacillate in, hey, we missed it, or the mistake was happened, or whatever. And I think that just shows why you are such a good leader, and really, why you bring such value to the clients that you serve. Let's switch gears for a second, because one of the things that we talked about, but these are elements, I think, that are going to make sense to our audience here in just a second. But everything that you've been talking about is how to get the best out of your people, provide the best possible experience for the clients you serve, or the company you might work for.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is there's a little bit of game mechanics around that, right? There's a little bit of, storytelling, creativity, identifying strengths and weaknesses, character building, and, value expansion, right? I'm just making up my own words now, right? But at the end of the
Oh,
day,
I like it.
these are all components that resonated with me hearing the business side of DLR versus where you and I ended up in our last conversation, which was talking about game mechanics and
Right.
game development, and how everything from a role-playing game to a board game can actually really tell you a lot about the organization you have, the teams that you're working with, the people in the roles and the positions that they are. And in essence, what you do from a leadership perspective is figure out, where are my heroes? Who are my victims? who are my, evildoers or my enemies, and how do
Mhm.
I set the board up for success? So tell my audience a little bit about the gaming mindset that you sort of
Sure.
put that hat on and how you've applied that to not only your own inner workings of the agencies you've run or in the executive level roles that you've been in, but how you apply that today for the clients that you serve. And then how do you see other people out there being able to utilize it to get a better understanding of what deck of cards they've been handed with the teams or the client environments that they work with.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the foreshadowing. So well done. Um,
Thanks.
no, and we glossed over this, and as you've learned in my conversations, as I tend to go like squirrel, and then we go
No.
off in different directions. It's fun. But rolling back a little bit is so most of my time in Oxygen during the day is taken up with an organization called Starboard Collectives, which is it's a series of peer mentoring cohorts. So whether it's industry specific or subject matter focused, so 6 to 8 to 10 people who are all founders, owner operators who have the ability to learn from each other and be I call it a non-biased advisory board, because these are all people who are in it, who are experiencing it or have experienced it that time. And sometimes, especially at the top of an organization or near the top, you don't have a lot of peers that you can really have the conversations around. And I think my favorite example is we had someone who, after about 3 sessions, someone kept him, and everyone looked around and said, "Wow, you really need to part ways with that executive." And they hadn't even seen it, but it was that peer mentoring. And then we actually mentored them on how to kind of make that transition path. But it's having that unfiltered, unbiased. So my role is twofold: is leading a couple of cohorts specific to my industry, but also I get to do a really special job, which is identifying, building, not only building new cohorts and figuring out how to build those out, but also mentoring the cohort leaders and helping them be really good at their roles. Because for us, it's that quality of experience that really makes a difference and really matters to the people who are in there. So that's super exciting. But what I call my treat at the end of the day, so I spend my time on that and like, okay, I'm going to reward myself in the last couple hours of my workday, is and thanks to the Ripple Effect with Steve Harper, a podcast with Steve Harper, was connected with someone, and we're bringing all these ideas together, kind of exactly what you're talking about. So what
Yep.
is that gamification piece? And specifically for me, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons 45 years ago, and it's kind of been this underlying piece of my life. And about maybe 10 years ago, maybe less, I had this moment where I said, a lot of these skills that I've developed as a leader, as an organizational thinker, has come from playing these games. It's, very much whether it's in these cohorts, which is a shared community, or a business, which is a shared community. We're all trying to tell a story. We're all
Yep.
trying to tell a shared story. And what are the different components and elements and contributions that people have that come to that? And that starts to become really interesting. So, we're building out some thought leadership, some practice, and some tools around that idea of not just gamification, but role playing games, Dungeons and Dragons specifically, because it's people know. Um, what are those leadership skills? What are those organizational skills? What are those professional growth skills that can be learned from this information? And that's what my Substack is on different things that I've learned about leading people, growing people. And it's one of those things that once I kind of had that mind shift, it's almost like I'm going to go deep here. It's the Roddy Piper joint in the '80s. They Live, where he had the glasses and he kept seeing. Once I started to look at it in that lens, I couldn't unsee it. There were all these moments where I said, I learned that there, or
Yep.
I developed that skill there. And it's super exciting to me to be able to think, okay, what is this application and how does it apply forward? And to answer another piece you brought up, the other thing where it's been super helpful for me is in that kind of gamification or game theory and strategy. Because as CEOs, as leaders, we really like to make objective, clear, solid decisions. And most of our day is spent somewhere between the pure objectivity and the pure heuristics.
Yep.
And at some point, we've got to make a decision to move the thing forward. And a lot of that, I'm able to game out and help people learn what's that second order, third order, even fourth order thinking. If this, then what? What's the ripple effect? What's the outcome? What's the thing that's going to happen? And also help training the people around me, oh, we're going to do this thing. Okay. Have you thought about this as an outcome? So building curriculum around those kind of theories and those kind of aspects of helping play that out has been really I'm very much about like body energy, like where your center go, and when I get into it, it's like, yes, this feels really good.
You're in, and
Yeah.
you're in the flow, right?
Yeah.
There's so many questions I want to ask you. I mean, the thing that I think that is most telling, and for our audience out there, we have a wide variety of people, a bunch of different demographics, a bunch of different age levels, certainly a lot of different career experience. But gamification is as a concept or as a theory, if you think about it, a lot of, especially, I don't want to necessarily call any particular generation out, but the younger generation, millennials, the X Gen, they grew up on solo pursuit games, right? Solo effort games. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating about the type of work that you do and kind of the approach that you take to illuminate the game is if you've only done any kind of gaming where, the only reward was you and the television or the game, the computer or the console, you have these momentary victories where you're like, all right, I made that next level, or I did, I did all right, but I don't have anybody to share it with, right? It's a very isolated experience. The thing I like about the board game experience or the role playing game experience is your success is directly tied to someone else's success or in some effort of joint outcome. And I think that when you can learn how to function and operate in an environment like that for a mutual goal, a vision or a mission, games become a lot more interesting. They become a lot more rewarding. And the way that I would defend this to a CEO would be like, I don't want to have to come in and teach my people like how to play games. They're already doing it. They just
Right.
reality is they may not be doing it with your set of rules or your expectation or your outcome that you would hope. People are already gamifying everything that they do, from how many minutes they meditate a day to how they count their calories to, how many likes they got on Instagram. Whether you realize it or not, it's all part of that gamification. But the reality is, if you can do that in a collective where you can actually showcase the dynamics, the game mechanics of how to take these theories of collaboration, cooperation, creativity, what you bring to the table as your own individual hero or character, and you can leverage your skill sets and your abilities, and now how that fits within the dynamic of a team, you really open up a world of possibilities where people are now looking at things through a much, much different lens. And the thing I really respect about your approach and what you're going to be doing with this work, even going forward with, podcast in the book and, more additional, you're writing on Substack, which by the way, we'll put this in our show notes, but it's lifewithadvantage.substack.com is your Substack. Your brilliant writing gives voice to the fact that companies and specifically leadership needs to look at gamification and game mechanics because it might very well be the secret weapon that nobody's actually, leveraging.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I think there's a couple of kind of layers there in that, you know, in our post-pandemic world, in our return to office, or our, recollaboration, I think there's a lot of conversation around what is the new model of working together, what is the new office experience, and this offers a vehicle or a way of things becoming more sticky, of working together in different ways. And it's like, okay, I got to sit through another corporate training, or we get to do something that's interesting but also valuable. Because the thing that I've been really digging into is, what is the character, what is the archetype, what does that mean for you? And we all have different characters in our everyday lives. There are times I'm a parent, times I'm a partner, times I'm a, even in the work world, you're, who you are in, say, a project level meeting versus when you walk into the boardroom, you're shifting characters.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not like these are disingenuous roles that you're switching in and out of. It's these authentic pieces. And what I love is for me, it's helped define who I am, because as I'm starting to see what are the consistencies, what are the pieces of this character that I carry through in all these individuals, it really starts to create an authentic story for myself of, who is this person that's showing up and how are they showing up? So really bringing that into a more formalized conversation of really helping to build people and build individuals, and then by extension, build organizations using these tools. It's pretty exciting work to be digging into.
Yeah. And so necessary. I think one of the things, I'm sure you're familiar with this particular movie, but one of the things that, if I was actually in your role and I was pitching this to a CEO or an executive team about why this is important to spend time and money, resources on, is comes back to this movie called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I don't know if you remember. It's a Ben Stiller movie. Little odd, telling of a guy who basically is going through his corporate 9-to-5 job, works actually for Life magazine at the time, but just had a very plain vanilla kind of job, right? He's a,
Yeah.
kind of a normal guy, kind of a predictable life. And you could see him, and I think anybody who watches that movie could actually be like, well, that's my life, right? I mean, it may be different,
Yeah.
different job or whatever, but we just go through the motions. But how many times a day do we think about being the hero or saving the day, or, being the one that people depend on and come to, the hero in the story, if you will? And then how many of us go back from the daydream and be like, yeah, okay, now I just got to do the TPS reports. So,
Right,
it's
right.
like, and the reason I guess I bring that up is, for leaders that are like, I don't have time, or we don't have the resources necessarily to dedicate to that. If you don't, you're going to lose out on either identifying really, really amazing superstars that you have yet to identify in your team. And they'll either continue to show up and just go through the motions, and they'll take your paycheck and they'll put in their time, but they don't have any commitment or loyalty or value other than, just the core job function. You're probably getting 30, 40, 50% of them at best when they walk in the door. Or you could actually figure out what they really want to be when they grow up, and how they want to be
Right.
successful, or how they want to contribute, or what skill set you hired them for X, but they really excel at Y. And a lot of what I think I understand, this work to be focused on is helping people reach out into those assimilations of who they really want to be when they get the opportunity, how they go on these hero quests, how they go on these missions, how they show up and perform. And you allow an environment to be able to showcase that from a Dungeons and Dragons experience or a board game experience, but you get to see who they are when there's competition, or who they are when they're facing a challenge,
Yeah.
or who they are when they have to collaborate with others in order to accomplish something. And I would pitch to a CEO like, okay, so tell me how that is not different than your job right now, right? At
Right.
the end of the day, it's like, we still have a goal. We have a mission. We want to drive performance, and we want to get the best out of everybody, but we don't set them up for success. We don't set them up to look at things through this different lens, which means that if they don't look at things through a different lens, then the view never changes, which means the work never changes, which means the experience that you are already experiencing is probably never changing. So the thing that really caught my attention when you and I talked about that was the dynamic of it and the value of it. And it's kind of funny because you didn't know this, and I'll share this with you really quickly, and then I'll quit talking. But I worked up, I like to hike, and I'll come up with keynotes or trainings, just when in movement, right? When I'm doing something away from my computer or my phone, and I'm just out. And I came up with this entire talk about not game mechanics, but actually, your game level. And how many of us go
Mm.
through life playing at, like, I'll use an example because I like games of all kinds, but I play a lot of Madden football or NCAA football.
Okay.
And what's great about these games is they're a lot of fun. They're a good way to sort of ratchet down the stress for the day and just kind of zone out. But if you play on the basic level forever, you eventually get good and you stay there and you're like, oh, I can beat anybody, everybody. I'm awesome. But very few of us actually bridge up to the medium level or to the advanced or the platinum level, whatever it might be. And I was thinking about this from a keynote perspective about where do you fit within your own game level today? Are you always
Mm.
comfortable being at the
Hmm.
basic or the beginner level because you can always win and the outcome is almost always guaranteed? Or do you push yourself and challenge yourself? And if you created that mechanism where not only you and I are sort of going after the same thing together, but we're not going to play it at the basic level or the beginner level, we're going to play it at the advanced level. We're going to lose more than we win because that's how you win, or that's how you learn to win more, by getting these experience points and getting your hero lumps, if you will,
Hmm.
by the wins and the losses. And if you can correspond that back to an executive level thought process, which is, yeah, it's a little scary at the very beginning and it's not always going to have the outcomes that we're looking for, but that's okay because we're learning every step of the way. We're getting
Hmm.
more data. We're learning more about ourselves. We're learning about our colleagues and our coworkers, and we're able to find our successes collectively, take our lumps collectively, but at the end of the day, we're still moving towards that goal and that mission. And so I just want to throw that out there because
Yeah, that's
what
great.
you do with the game mechanic component really, really speaks to where I think individuals who might hear this be like, well, what game level am I playing? Am I doing it as a solo operator, or am I actually trying to be a part of a collective or a part of a team? And if so, how do I show up and what do I do to get better? And how do I bring out the best in the people that are with me as well?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I think I'm fascinated by video games. I think especially now in their modern form, they're some of the most interesting narrative forms of storytelling out there. But I'm fortunate, or I appreciate that I'm good and enjoy board games and role playing games. So I'm really bad at video games. In fact, when I owned my agency, the team would come and play Halo at lunch, and after a couple of weeks, they very politely came to me and said, "Would it be okay if you didn't play with us because you're really dragging the team down?" As the owner, to have the team have the safety to come to me and say, "Hey, you kind of suck. Is that
That's
okay?" I'm like,
good.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I get it." But a couple of things you said that, if I could reflect upon that, is you're right. Like, I'd say for the most part, everyone is the hero in their own journey. And what is that collectivization and that shared story again of who are we? Why are we? What are we going to do? And how do we bring the heroes out of each person there and give them a reason to be heroic? Because that's only, again, it's only going to benefit the company and
Yeah.
benefit the organization. And then the other thing I really enjoy, so that's on an organizational level, on an individual leader level. So I'm what's called the forever DM, which is usually I'm running the games. And part of that is my deep-seated need for control, but that's a whole different conversation. Um,
And a DM would be, in like D&D terms, or Dungeons and
uh,
Dragons would be like
Dun-
Dungeon Master, right?
Dungeon Master, yeah.
Yeah, so you're either a DM or a GM, right? You also call it the Game Master as well.
It's universal, yeah,
Universal, yep.
basically. Which is a not there is a corollary to being the CEO because you're responsible for setting the table and telling the general arc of the story. But the thing I love, and the thing where I coach sometimes, is as a DM, part of your job is to prepare for every eventuality. And because you're working with human beings, the first thing that's going to happen is something you didn't plan for, which is very much like being a CEO. So it's
Yep.
building those skills and that adaptability that really comes into play.
I love that. So, and by the way, we could talk forever. I want to be respectful of your time, and um, you know, it- we may have to do a follow up sequel to this one. But let me just ask you, for someone
Yeah.
who's out there that is, maybe on a leadership team, or maybe they're running their company and they're thinking, what David's telling me about game mechanics is something that I I should probably look into that. I should take a deeper look because I hadn't thought about it through that, that approach or that lens. Give us, some idea of your approach to how you introduce this, not only because, like you said, you're the CEO and you're responsible for setting it all. Well, I also don't want to set up the wrong game and be an idiot because of it. Right. So I don't want to look bad, but if you got
Right.
somebody that's out there, it's like, okay, I would be interested in learning how this could apply to my team or to my organization, my nonprofit or my municipality or my school team or whatever. How would I get started with David to do, sort of these, like you said, those singular focuses, try something small, have a success, and then build from there. Without throwing any specifics to an organization or the type of environment, if you just met somebody because of this podcast that came to you and asked you that question, how would we work together in that regard? What would be your approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the first initial approach is that fact finding, that understanding. So where are the gaps, where are the opportunities, and how do they intersect? And, what are the possibilities of, where do those kind of hero journeys fit? And we have a couple tools that are, we're in the development of starting to use the character building tools as an archetype builder to kind of understand, almost a strength and weakness finder of, oh, this is how this person reacts in stress situations. This is how people collaborate. So really starting to build a profile of the teams in simple ways. So that's kind of that first assessment piece of just understanding what the landscape is. And what I found so far is the beautiful thing, because D&D is becoming part of the popular culture with, Stranger Things and with podcasts and things like that. What was this nerdy little thing when I was a kid is now everybody's doing it. And as a quick aside, I was at a convention a couple of weeks ago, and like there were so many families there. There were 3 generations of human beings all there, and it just was
That's
amazing
awesome.
to me. And there's a whole separate podcast about the parenting and D&D aspect that we'll save for later. But what I've experienced is I talk to people about this, and I would say 9 out of 10 people either are aware of it or have some inkling or are very familiar with it. And they immediately go, that's super interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah.
The 1 out of 10 is, oh, that's lame. That doesn't make sense, whatever. And you do sales. I will take 9 out of 10. I'll take 90% at the top of the funnel any day of the week.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so that's really where it is just starting that conversation. Here's what we offer. Is this interesting to you? And it's okay if it's not. I don't
Yeah.
need to control everything. It's those people who are really going to like, okay, let's buckle up. Let's dig in. This is super interesting. Let's do it. Because it sounds really interesting. And I always come back to, I believe it's a Steve Jobs quote, which is, play is the highest form of work, of creativity. Like, let's get there and we can help you get there.
Yeah. Is there I mean, I know I personally have read a lot of books about gamification in the workplace. But do you have any recommendations, podcasts? Obviously, your Substack for sure is a great place to start. But any other resources for anyone who might be like, okay, I'm not ready to talk to you yet, David, because I want to do a little bit more research. But are there any places that you might suggest they start and recognize, you go down this wormhole, I mean, you're going to go. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
out there, but any places to give people just kind of a comfort level to just get a little baseline before they actually engage in conversation. Say, okay, Dave, come bring what you do and bring it into my company. But let me get a little teaser sample beforehand.
Yeah, there's not, so out there, that's the thing that I'm finding so far is there's not a lot of work out there. Like there's not a lot of the Venn diagram coming over. A couple of places that I really dig into. One is the work of Jennifer Garvey Berger,
Okay.
who is a complexity model thinker. She is amazing. And I always, she gave me one of my favorite quotes, which is, any system will break the moment you introduce human beings to it, because humans are complex. Humans are
Very
complex.
true. Yeah.
And I love that, and it plays so much into this work, which is okay, let's embrace, address, and accept the complexity and build. I always call it, from my leadership skills, is a toolbox of you can't plan for everything, and honestly, sometimes you got to use a flathead because you don't have a Phillips screwdriver, which isn't ideal, but it'll do the job most of the time. But there is not always a perfect solution. But as you build skills, experience, and knowledge, you get to build this toolbox. And I've had Sean's a great example. I've had other people who have worked for me who've even said like they know that I always have a plan because I have this deep toolbox. It's okay. If this fails, what's our, my joke is I don't have a plan B. I usually have like about into like GH territory. But playing games helps me with that playing out. So a really long answer to say I don't have a lot of resources for you, but I'm really excited about the opportunity to create them.
Oh, I love it. And I love the fact that you are committed to doing that. And it sounds like based on a connection that, I helped create in terms of a ripple, you guys there could be two of you that are going after the same problem and creating something for the collective good, which it just warms my heart in such a way.
And mine too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just grateful that, you guys got together and there was something significant that came out of it. So that was awesome. Before I let you go, I always like to, and again, I think for my audience, I think there are going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of real interest in this episode because you are infinitely interesting. And I appreciate your time today. I always like to finish these interviews making a little bit of a left turn at Albuquerque to switch up, just to give people a little bit more sense of who you are as an individual, aside from just the work and what you bring to the table from a professional perspective. So I ask what I call ripple connection questions. They're kind of fun questions to ask and fun to answer. Are you okay with that?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah. What was the first game that you remember playing that really just set you off on the path to wanting to be a gamer?
Probably Risk.
Okay.
Was the first. That's kind of an entry point for a lot of young people, but it's cliche as it is. It was the Dungeons and Dragons basic box when I was probably 11 years old that we bought. It was in the $1.99 discount rack at Long's Drugs. And I got it home and I opened up and there was no board game. Who sells a board game without a board?
It was just a manual.
I got ripped off at $1.99 of my hard-earned money. And just started to unpack and do it, and it opened up my world and completely expanded. And here I am, 45 years odd later, still talking about it.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm just going to pick a random age. When you were the 10-year-old version of David, what did David want to be when he grew up?
10-year-old. So probably I either wanted to be a firefighter or a dinosaur. Which you can play the, helping people or something completely unrealistic, which is probably something I carried through my life. But, I think 10-year-old David just wanted to be a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the adults in my life seemed really unhappy. And so the idea of like, get a career and be something. I'm like, why? What's the value in that?
Look at what, yeah, I don't want that as an example.
And, I think to me, that was probably a formative experience of realizing like you can make that change. You can re-identify yourself and make the progression. And, as being the parent of young adults, watching them, society saying, hey, you're in your early 20s, please make a decision that's going to set the trajectory for most of your life and happiness for the rest. And it's been really wonderful for me to help mentor them through that and be like, you know what? I didn't get my act together till my late 20s ish. And, and what's cool is they're so much more well-formed, great human beings than I certainly was in my early 20s. So the kids are going to be okay. And that makes me very happy.
Well, and, age and wisdom obviously rubbed off on them from you. So you get, you and your wife, you get a lot of credit there. So that's always a positive.
I remind them consistently how lucky they are, but they, they're on the fence. It's okay.
They'll figure it out eventually. I don't know if they're going to acknowledge it verbally, but I promise you they do feel it. So,
but I don't know if you remember, I certainly did, man, early 20s, you knew everything. It was great.
Yeah. And then by the time you hit 30, you're like, man, I don't know anything. And like,
Oh, I
how'd
love
I survive my 20s? I have no idea.
my lack of knowledge has been beautiful. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
What's what is one book that changed your life?
Ooh. Well, I mentioned the Dungeons and Dragons book, but
Yep.
I'm going to pivot on you because I'm not going to use a book.
Okay.
So the thing that I can honestly say changed my life was it was a record album. It was REM, Fables of the Reconstruction, their third
Oh
studio
yeah.
album. Uh, so what, 85, 86 maybe
Yep.
it came out, and 18-year-old me just I looked through every of the liner notes and the design and the layout and the storytelling, and it was probably several months before this little tiny pilot light in the back of my head went on and said, "Wait a minute, somebody actually made choices to put that together. This was intentional. It didn't just happen." And I think in the movie version of my life, I'll hold up the record. I'm going to do design. But the
Yep.
reality is, it was still probably a good 5 or 6 years before I even knew that graphic design was not only a career, but it was a career that I had access to. Which again, that set the trajectory for literally where I am today of being a designer, then a creative director, then a business owner and CEO. Like all those paths came from that moment, realizing, oh, design is a thing.
Man, that's one of the best answers I've gotten. And look at how many ripples came because of that, right? I mean, how many
That's a good
different.
point.
Yeah, I love that is fantastic. Hats off to you on that one. That's a great one and a phenomenal album. So
Yes.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. If you weren't doing what you're doing now,
Hmm.
what would you be doing?
Like in this exact moment or in my life?
Career wise, or yeah, more or less, like if you could just choose a different path for yourself, what would it be?
Ooh. Uh, I might take the coward's way on this out on this in that I really enjoy what I'm doing right now. Like I'm really, I think for me, and then that's been the beauty over the last few years is I'll say like shifting the levers of, what are the things I'm putting my time and oxygen. Um, but I think in my perfect world, I would be writing a lot more, and just creating more and not creating content, but creating writing. I really love writing for games specifically. Um, and it's not a get rich, it's not even a get rich slow scheme. It just, you don't make money at it, but it's a passion. It's a really involved. um you know so many people are like, I'm gonna retire and write my novel. I want to retire and publish my own board game because everyone wants to publish a board game, and I've got my ideas. So but the cool thing is, like, I get to do these things and
Yeah.
bring me up and give me energy. So the other, like, would I do something different? No, probably not. And that's okay.
Another excellent answer. I love that because you are a man of purpose and you know what your purpose is and where you want to put your time and energy and attention. I think that's perfectly acceptable. I can't
Yeah.
begin to tell you how many people wish they had that luxury. So that's pretty awesome. What do you want to be known for? At
Ooh.
the end, you're out, you're on your deathbed, you're about to shuffle off to Buffalo, you know, you're rolling negative points, whatever. It's
Whatever it is, missing my
it's
death
over,
saves.
but
Yep.
you get to hear that one thing that people like just really loved about you. What do you want to be known for?
Hmm. You're asking me to address my mortality here. I wasn't expecting that.
So, sorry.
No, no, it's all good. I think on the an individual level is just remembered as, a kind human being who traveled the world and left it a better place. Like that's a pretty high bar. But I think professionally, the thing that is really fascinating me the most right now is, and from a legacy perspective, is I believe we are at the stage now with 3 generations of playing these games that we can start to have some real clinical research and real science around the positivity for the brain, the positivity for human. I call it, building better humans, but also building better humanity, and
Yep.
really finding out, like, what, at a clinical level, are these making a difference? And, I have a sample size of one human being, one of my children, and one family, my family, of how it's been a positive factor for
Yep.
their brain development. Like, it's there. It can happen. So from a life's work perspective, if I was able to be the person to drive some of that, would be pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think mission accomplished. I think you're already doing that. So you'll have a lot more people to you know to celebrate that. I'm sure in the future. But I mean, the work you're doing, the approach that you take, just the impact and the ripples that you've created. I can tell you from firsthand experience, having heard about you before I actually got to meet you. Now having met you and feeling really really blessed to now know you. You are one of the people that are what I call a rippler. I mean, you're out there making a difference. You're focused on making your life, your environment, and anybody that's around it better, which I think is a huge compliment that comes directly, from my conversation with Sean when he set up this initial introduction, which was, you will probably not find a nicer, more committed individual to helping you with whatever it is that you're doing. David's going to help you, be better at whatever it is. And so I think that's amazing. So I'm very, very grateful that our paths have crossed. I'm very grateful that, we have not only had this conversation, but there we're going to have many, many more. And before I let you go, what's the best way that you'd like people to learn about your work? I mean, we mentioned your Substack, but I know you've got a few other ways that people can connect with you. So I wanted to make sure that we work that in, and we'll also include this in the show notes as well.
Yeah, thank you. So the two best ways are it's Starboard Collective, so starboard-collectives.com, which is our peer mentoring cohorts. That's sort of my primary location. And then you can go to withadvantage.us, which is the kind of the collection of all the various places you can find me online and socially and all that places. I don't, outside of LinkedIn, I don't interact in social media much. And, part of that is just, keeping a privacy layer between my personal and everything.
Sure.
But yeah, those are the two main places. And really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we are so grateful that you joined us today. You're an amazing individual, and I'm so grateful that we had this time together, and I look forward to the next one. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Guys, we'll be back with another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast. But until then, David, ripple on.